Hello, welcome to the April 21st, 2023 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream. And if you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can submit questions in advance, or you can simply ask questions in the chat field. When asking questions, realize that I will soon lose the ability to answer all questions in a real-time manner. So if we could try to refrain from asking the same questions over and over again, if you don't get an immediate response, we'll try to get to them all chronologically. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase or which version of the Steinberg software that you are using, that would be appreciated, such as I'm running Cubase 12, Cubase 11, 10.5, 10. I'm running which level, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, if you could let us know that, and which operating system. That information is helpful. We will we'll go through all the questions chronologically. You'll see a few hours after the live stream ends, an index with timestamps with all the topics covered in the particular live stream. And so you could refer to that and jump to particular sections of the live stream to see answers to particular questions. Hang on. So, and if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, and we have over 25,000 topics covered in a little over 3 years, you could go to cubaseindex.com. We want to thank Jan from Stockholm for all of his work in creating that website. It's a wonderful resource. We also want to thank our two moderators, Jazz Dude and Agent K, for all of their work. Making it a better, more friendly environment, and for kind of helping out in moderation. Also, a special thanks to Jazz Dude for all of his work with the Cubase Nation Discord. So that's a wonderful resource of information that's compiled for Steinberg users. So take advantage of that. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America. I primarily focus on Steinberg products, and I'm the host of the live stream today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you are watching this live stream live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. I'm sorry that we had to take some time off from our last live stream on April 10th because we had the NAMM show in California. Next week, there won't be any live streams because I have corporate kickoff meetings for the week. So I'll be traveling, but then starting, I believe, May 2nd, and from there on, we should be on our normal Tuesday and Friday schedules. So apologize, we haven't had many live streams this month, but everything should kind of be back to normal without meetings and work travel, and vacations for me. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. Okay, so we see the first question. Hello, how can I set the project to E flat major and transpose later to G major? So one of the tools that you could use for this is just utilizing the transpose tracks. Let's say I think like this song might be in the key of A, but we'll just... So what I could do is I want to take my drum tracks, and maybe I don't want to transpose those. So what I'm going to do is we'll see under, so as soon as we have these selected, we could choose to not have particular tracks transposed. So if we wanted to, let's just make sure I have this set up. Okay, so we will see this. I'll select these particular drum tracks here. So I may want the musical parts like the guitar, bass, vocals to transpose. So when we see global transpose, I'm going to take my drums and set those to independent. And if we want to transpose from E flat to G, there'll be 1, 2, 3, 4 semitones. So all we would need to do is to add what we call a transpose track. So we're going to right click. Let's go to our transpose track here. So we'll just come directly here. So as we're playing, let's say we're in our root key of E flat major. I think this might be an A. So let's say right there at that point, I want to just do a transposition up 4 semitones. So I'm going to click directly here in my song, and I'm just going to type in, I'll click onto 0, and I will enter a 4. And as we do this, all of my guitars and bass will transpose up. So all your MIDI tracks. And then if you want to go back to your root key or down, just type in like -2. So just go add a transpose track, and then from there you could click in the value field to transpose the audio up and down. And you could choose different algorithms for the particular file. So if you wanted to come over here, you could just choose different algorithms if needed to experiment. But that's how you could transpose from E flat major to G major. All right. So we see Jan from Cubase Index. We see Filter Freak on. All right, so we see a question from Vishnu from India. Can we EQ the click in Cubase just to get the top end out so that it won't easily bleed into the mic? Thanks. So what you could do is, let's say let's say if we have a click track here, and we have the click track on. So if we wanted to process, the first thing you might want to do if you're recording, is always make sure that you have like kind of closed back headphones for tracking, because that way it'll kind of bleed less. If we go to the transport menu, you could come over to your metronome setup, and then you can see click sounds, and you'll have different presets that can be connected. So let's say as we play, and I'll just kind of go beyond here. So if we go to transport, to metronome setup, we go to click sounds, and then you could just say use custom sounds. So if you want to use something like different, like a lot of people may use, like we'll talk about a Yuri click, and you could just come over here and have like a vintage spike. But if you had this set to the default click sound and you wanted to EQ it, what we could do is we could set kind of the EQ around. We will set our left and right locators around the project, and if we go to our project menu to signature track, we could see render audio click between left and right locators. And now that we've done that, it's now just a separate audio file. So I could turn off the click track from playing because it's now rendered here as an audio file. And if we wanted to EQ this to change the tone of it to get less, you could just apply a normal channel EQ to that. But always if you have headphones that if you have like open headphones, open back headphones, those could bleed more into the mic. So there's certain headphones that work better for tracking than mixing. So, but if you needed to render the click, again, you could go to signature, set the left and right locators around it, go to your signature track and render audio click. And then once you're in the particular track here, you could just apply an EQ to the click track and take some high end out, or you could just change the particular sound if needed. All right, so Ace Amadeus asks, Greg, my laptop running Windows 10 64-bit crash and I have to reinstall Windows. Will Cubase work okay if I'm going forward to use external SSD drive and install Halion 7 and various Steinberg VSTs? Thanks. So yeah, you shouldn't have any problems. Running it off an external SSD drive, that's kind of where your particular if you're booting up from there. So generally and if you have kind of an internal drive where the operating system is, it's probably best to run Cubase on the system drive, and then run all of the libraries and all the content from your external drive. And if you go to the Steinberg library manager, so that's usually what takes a lot of the space, we could just say, okay, I want to go to all my Cubase patches, and at this point we could just choose to move these particular patches to a different location. So you could use an external SSD to have like your whole system. Generally, you probably want Cubase on the same, you want the Cubase application installed on the same drive as your operating system is. And then if you have so if that's your external drive, that should be fine. But if you're looking to kind of minimize space and free up space, running all of the content such as samples and loops on the external drive, you could move all of those or choose to install all of them to the external drive, and that's very common. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan checking in from Kenosha, Wisconsin, and Walter Blackledge from St. Louis. Thanks for being on. And we have Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, we have Lanewood Studios checking in from the Netherlands. Thanks for joining us today. All right, and we see Jan from Cubase Index. Welcome back from vacation and the NAMM show. So yeah, we were able to sneak in one live stream before in between, but thank you, Jan. All right, so we have a question from Ace Amadeus. Could you please explain what are .rex files? What are the pros and cons of them? How do we use them in Cubase? So generally, rex files are going to be like a basic loop file. And this was originally developed by Propeller Heads. It was originally Steinberg Recycle, but it was, and then further developed by Propeller Heads. It used to be originally a Steinberg product. So let's say if we have a drum loop. So Rex loops used to be very popular because in a lot of different drum loops, it used to be that doing kind of real-time time stretching was very tricky. So what a Rex file would allow you to do, so this is created inside of Recycle, and it's a common loop file format that was used in Reason, and since most DAWs are kind of doing this natively now, it's not as widely used. But what a Rex file is, it's basically a loop, and if we were to look at our loop in our sample editor, we see that this is one file, one contiguous file. But if we go into our hit point editor, we can now come over here and basically create slices. And what this will do, I'll just take it out of musical mode here first. So let me just switch this back to okay, so when we double click, we can now have all of these as slices. So the intention of a kind of a Rex file was that as we would make copies, that it would, and we changed the tempo, that these would automatically just, as the tempo changed, the loop would play back in time with the particular file because it would just then re-trigger, reposition the slices. But since we have kind of musical mode, it's not as needed because we could kind of do this in an easier way without having to have particular Rex files. So if we just come over here to our loops and say, okay, I wanted a drum loop. And let me just change my preview channel here real quick. So as I drag a drum loop in, we can see that this will be placed into musical mode. And as I change the tempos of the file, that it will just do real-time time stretching. So if I say, okay, let's make it 144. So originally the Rex file, instead of having to do real-time time stretching, which wasn't as viable at when Rex files were created, would basically take the individual slices and you could drag that in and it would follow the tempo because it would just reposition all the slices to fit. So, but as programs like Cubase added the ability of doing real-time time stretching, the necessity for Rex files was kind of waned and really was kind of almost used exclusively in Reason. So. All right, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. Is there a shortcut or key command to bring up the project logical editor? Thanks. Let's take a quick look. So I think if we go to our key commands, let's go to project menu. Let me just... So there isn't a key command, but if we go to the edit menu, we could just assign a key command for open project logical editor. So by default, there isn't a key command for the open project logical editor, but if you go to edit to key commands, you could just under the edit category, just come right over here to edit, and you'll see open project logical editor, and then you could specify a custom key command to open that up. All right, so great to see. Turn my cell phone down. Someone that's calling me from Ghana. All right. All right, so we see Jovanovic 3D checking in from Slovenia. Thanks for joining us. Ted Springman, wonderful to see you. And Ted Springman asks, given a MIDI track of arpeggiated notes, I'd like to randomly enable or mute the notes by simply pressing a MIDI key or to hear notes and release the key to mute notes. Any Cubase suggestions? Okay. All right, so let's see if we could get this set up. So let me just create a quick arpeggiator. Just go to a different project where we have instrument loaded up already. Okay, so let's say okay, so I'll just go ahead and record a quick arpeggiator here. And let me adjust my octave. Okay, just solo this. Take it out of loop mode. Sorry about that. All right, so I'm just going to turn this into arpeggios by just saying freeze MIDI modifiers. Okay, so let's say I wanted to mute particular notes. So let's see. I think we could maybe, and this might be a bit of a left bit of a left-handed approach to it, but I think if we go to our MIDI, let's go to our logical editor. We can say type is equal to note, and let's say I want the value 1 of the note. So let's say, just look at this, make sure I have the right octave. All right, so let's say I want E2, so we'll say pitch is equal to E2. And what I want to do with that note is, all right, so let's see if we could transform. All right, so let's see. What I'm trying to do is see if I could just mute the particular notes. All right, we'll take value 2 or velocity, and let's subtract 120. Just we'll do it kind of after, just thinking of a way to. Let's see if we can do it with the input transformer. See if we could filter out E2 notes. So that's going to do it. So I don't know a way to like play the note in real time. Let me just reread the question again. All right, so it just says, I like to randomly enable or mute notes by simply pressing a MIDI key to hear notes and release the key. So if I'm actually playing like the arpeggiator here, so let's say I'm on this, and if I just release the particular note, so say I'm here and I'm holding down C, E, G, and I release the G, so whatever notes that I'm playing within the arpeggiator will sound. So if I'm playing C, E, A, let go of the A, it's just going to play C and E. And then if I hit the G, it'll just include whatever notes are being held down. So just to show this a little easier. So let's say if I'm, and I'll move this down. So let me just turn. So if I release the G, it's only going to play the 2 pitches. So whatever notes are actually pressed are the ones that are included within the arpeggio. But I don't know of a way to kind of filter out notes. I could take notes and so I don't know a way to filter it out in real time other than maybe just what you're actually inputting. but I don't know a way to hit a key and mute E's that are playing or mute G2s that are playing off the top of my head, but I may be able to work on it. Ted, if you want to send me an email, I might be able to come up with a particular input transformer or logical editor that we could trigger with a key command. All right, wonderful to see Soren checking in from Sweden. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question. Hello from Albania. Is there a way to in Cubase to see real-time chords while playing? So if we're in the editor, what you could do, so let's say we're coming over here. I'll just extend this out. So once we're in the key editor, I'll make this larger. If you go to like the little setting, the setup window here, and you'll make sure that you have, I think, the status line enabled. So now as we're recording in, so we'll just come over here, I'll solo this, let's say. You can see that as I play a chord, you'll see the current chord display. And I still have the Arpeggiator on. So if you just want... So you can just see within the MIDI editor, right up at the top here, and you can see what chords are being played in. So if we wanted to even come down here, let's make sure that we had the status line turned on. You can see the current chord display directly here. So as soon as we just come up and so just look right here in the current chord display, and then you could just make sure that the status line is turned on, and then when you're in a record, you could just see the chords that are being generated right there and being played in. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Thanks for joining us. All right, and all right, my chat field jumped on me. All right, so a question, Jerome Gibson asks, please show how to set up VST System Link with Mac and Windows, Cubase 12 and Cubase 10, thanks. So really what you need to have is, I don't have two computers connected now, but if you go to your studio setup, what you need is a digital audio connection, like a SPDIF or an ADAT or a or ASEBU, so like a digital audio connection. And what you want to do is just to come over here, and you want to set that this is going to be online. You could set your, let's say in my interface doesn't have a digital connection, just has analog connections, but we could set kind of the particular digital connection on both systems, and then you'll see that those will basically, be synchronized. And what the VST System Link allows you to do is to take both computers once there's a digital audio connection, and then you could hit play on one computer and the other computer will be sample accurately synced. So it's very analogous to having two analog tape machines. Like if you say, oh, we need 32 tracks for this project, that you would take, two 24-track or two 16-track tape machines and synchronize them together. So that's kind of what you're doing with VST System Link. I don't have I don't have my PC connected and turned on so that it could be seen, but you want to basically take the same digital audio connection, and the two will basically do like a handshake, and then the two will run in sync with each other. Now you could also, if you say use selected ASIO ports for data only, at that point it's only taking the 24th bit of information to do the synchronization. But if you wanted to send 16 ports of MIDI information from one computer to another computer, where maybe one computer is hosting virtual instruments, you could choose to use the selected ASIO ports for data only, and you could send MIDI data and use one computer for hosting virtual instruments, and our computer for running the sequence. We see a lot of film composers use this, where one computer will play back video and the other computer will simply play back the sequence and all of the audio. So, but just set up a digital audio connection between the two computers, and then they'll be sample accurately synchronized. All right, so Ted Springman asks, also on the topic of arpeggiated notes, how to best randomize timings to make less machine-like. So let's say if we go back to our Rhodes patch here. So let's say let's take a look just at some of the parameters within the particular plugin. So if you wanted to come over here, so as we work with this, there's two different arpeggiators. So let's say as we're playing this, let's see if I could apply another MIDI plugin after that. So we'll set our swing. Another way to do this is, let's take a look at the Apache SX, because this will have, we could actually take your own sequence in. So any little sequence that you have, you could actually trigger. But I don't think that there's kind of like a swing feel. But let's say if we do have an arpeggiator on board, so let's say as we play and we record in, let me just take off the playback here real quick. So let's say we'll look at our Apache 5. And let me just all right, so say if we come here and if we wanted to make that less mechanical afterwards, so say this will be basically synced. But once we have that playback going on, that we could apply different types of feels to it. So let's say even if I want to take that and now run it through the quantizer plugin. So we say, let's just add more swing to it here. So as we play this back even, so, or if you wanted to just quantize it after the fact, you could just say, okay, let's come here and I'm going to set my swing to 88%. That now, and then you could alter the swing after the fact. So, but generally arpeggiators are intended to be kind of on the beat, but you could change the feel by simple quantization afterwards. All right, wonderful to see PZ136 on. And we see Best Korean Jesus, hoping that everyone's doing well. Great to see you. All right, we have user 333 checking in from Melbourne, Australia. Thanks for joining us, probably very late. And we got Parabot 2. All right, so Rick Horton says, wish you could solo a track in a group that is soloed without having to unsolo the group first. May not be a big deal, but it does come up in my workflow. So let's check it out. All right, so I'll just revert this. Okay, so I'm going to take all of my drums and send them to a group. So we're going to add a group channel to the selected tracks. All right, so now all my drums are going into this group. So let's say I want to solo my snare. So it looks like it's, we'll solo the group, but I don't have to solo the group first. And so I'll reread this. It says, wish you could solo a track in a group that is soloed without having to unsolo the group first. Okay, so let's say maybe the group is soloed here. Okay, so if the group is soloed, everything that's feeding into the group is soloed. So let's see if we... So, I think that makes sense because, if you have soloed group, everything is soloed. But one of the things you could do is just unsolo. If you just click here on a deactivate all solo states, and you could assign that to a keyboard shortcut. But I think it does make sense that if it's already included within a solo, that, that you could just come over here and deactivate the solo states. And you could do that with a keyboard shortcut if you wanted to just go back to where you were. So I understand that it may interfere with your workflow, but I think it does make logical sense. All right, so we see a question from Mark Isper. Hi, downloaded Cubase SE and AI and then Cubase 12 on Windows 10 Pro I started using, but after some minutes in both Cubases, there are some strange lines appearing on my screen. Thanks. So sometimes it could be, if you see kind of vertical lines, it could be an indication that maybe it could be with markers. So let's say if we add a marker track, and then you could, in preferences, let's see if it's under event display, but we could have the marker tracks automatically show the marker line. So let's, I'll open up a project with it on. So you'll see the grid lines. I'm not sure if they're vertical or horizontal lines. But like if I have a lot of markers, like in this particular track, we could see that these marker lines can automatically be shown throughout the project window. So and you could just turn that off with a particular preference if you wanted to. So let me know if those are kind of vertical lines, and sometimes there could be different display drivers that could cause issues as well. All right, we see from Lanewood Studios about the solo, just control click on the track, so we'll try that. So command or control, so let's say we go back to here. And we have the group track soloed. Let's try control. So it looks like if you just click, so while it's soloed here, if you just double click on the solo for a track while holding down control or command key, that will just solo that one particular track. So let's say we're here and we have all of our drums and it's soloed. So try holding down control and command, control or command, and double clicking on the track you want to solo. And then try that. So thanks for the brain cramp reminder, Lanewood Studios. All right. We have Zephaniah, Yashar from Detroit. Thanks for joining us today. So we see user 333 says, Greg, do you know anyone from Propellerhead? So I was longtime friends, probably known Ernst, who is one of I think the founder of the company. I think he's recently retired, but I've known him for 31 years or so. He used to actually write the manuals for Steinberg, but I don't think he's involved with it anymore. So, all right, so we see Mark Rabin checking in from Montana, where it is snowing, and his dog Stella says hi. So we hope you're doing well. Okay, so we have a question. I have one project that will not export. How can I get it to export? So make sure you know the export range. So I'm not sure if you're getting a message. So sometimes people may export in if their markers are backwards, or maybe the markers. So say if I have my markers backwards here and I go to export audio mix down, and I'll come over here, say, okay, let's just do a stereo out, and we'll export audio. So if you get a message, something like that, it could indicate that the left and right locators are reversed, or maybe they're on top of each other. So one thing you can do is try just hitting like Control or Command A and then the letter P, and that will come over and set the left and right locators around the entire project. So make sure that you have the locators around the entire project. So often when I get a question like that, that's kind of what it is. All right, so we see Captenergy Music. He's just happy that we're all back together after NAMM. And he asked if anything caught my eye, just curious. Unfortunately, at NAMM shows, I'm often just stuck in the booth constantly. So I didn't get a chance to kind of walk around the show at all this year. So I got a lunch break, and that was my only, I only had like 20 or 30 minutes for a quick lunch, but I didn't get a chance to actually walk around the show at all, unfortunately. So. All right, so we have Lanewood Studios says, I saw an announcement of this live stream that you're going to demo how to set up the Embody Immerse in Cubase. So yeah, so let's take a look at that. So let's say if we have, and this is a new product that was announced during the NAMM show, and this is available to work in Cubase, Wavelab, or Nuendo. But let's say if we have a project, and what this is kind of a, like a physical modeling of different control rooms. So this is done by Embody, which does a lot of incredible projects. And what's kind of interesting about this is, one, it's kind of intended to work with, you actually, once you download a program, you'll get a QR code, and that will take you to an app that you download. and you're going to, basically move the camera of your phone so that you see your face, and then it'll ask you to move your head left and right, and it's actually taking a scan of your ear. And what we need to do to get this configured inside of Cubase or Nuendo is just to come to the preferences. And once you're in the preferences in control room, we want to say use phones control room as a preview channel. So there's two different rooms. There's Lursen mastering as well as Alan Meyerson's room. So we've all heard Alan Meyerson's work. He's a guy that mixes the Hans Zimmer projects. So generally the best place to do this, because this is intended to work with headphones. So it may not translate for speakers. It's really kind of intended for headphones, but we will come over and I'm going to put this as in my control room inserts. So as soon as we come over here, we could just say, okay, we'll listen. So we go to Lursen mastering room, and what they've done is, all of the calculations for what the room sounds like from, mono to stereo to full immersive. So basically you could have kind of the sound of either Lursen mastering or Alan Meyerson's mastering room directly inside of Cubase. So when you go to listen to with your headphones, we'll just kind of bypass it just so you get a frame of reference. So, and this may not translate as well over speakers through a live stream, but we could choose, you have some of your main settings where you can say, okay, I want to adjust the ambience. I wanted to adjust routing. So here we're going to have it set up to be stereo. We could adjust the headphone EQ mount and even a limiter and what channel configuration that we're using. So here I just have it kind of configured for stereo. So again, you don't kind of get the full effect of the Immerse Virtual Studio here until you have headphones on. So we'll go ahead and now you'll hear tonal differences. That was okay. So this is kind of doing room correction, but in your headphones so that it's accurately, all the mix decisions that you're making will carry over. And you could also have kind of some headphone types. I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours. Now you're asking Beatles or songs. Something about it just sounds so as you kind of are working with this, you could just have those two. Let me just try a different project here real quick. Just exit out of this real fast. I'll show you on a different project here. Just do more of an orchestral thing. So let's say if we're mixing soundtracks and we wanted to have the sound of Alan Meyerson's room, and he's kind of Hans Zimmer's engineer, so he's won all sorts of awards. But let's say we'll do maybe a Schubert piece. So again, I'll just come over here so if I want to, have confidence that, I could, it's as if we are mixing in the particular environments at this point. We can say, okay, I want it to be in Alan Meyerson's room. If we're to bypass this. And let's say, okay, we wanted to switch over to the Lursen mastering. And it looks like we could have different studios here. So we'll go ahead and bypass it. And let's go ahead back to Alan Meyerson's room. So kind of all the sonic characteristics of the particular studios you can now have in your master section, so you could kind of mix with confidence. And I'm sure this is also great if you watch some of the marketing videos, especially the guys from Lurson Mastering. They're like, okay, you know, now I could have my headphones and I could take my studio wherever I'm working. So this way you could have, you know, different mix environments that you could actually utilize you know, for your project. And again, it's, you know, it may not translate over the live stream, but using your headphones, and you could choose particular headphone types, or there's also just kind of a generic, you know, open back, closed back, or in-ear monitors that you could set, so you could have that sense of the particular room without having to spend all the money to go to that particular room. All right, so we see Patrick Emmanuel A says he's happy to be on live. See, Patrick says, saw your pictures on Facebook. How's your vacation? Said vacation was wonderful. We had a great time. Just want to go back again. Maui's always recommend it. All right, so we see just from Mark Rabin. So what's the upcoming live schedule, please? I'm so confused. So next week I have to go out to California again for meetings at Yamaha. So there won't be any live streams next week, but the following week, May 2nd, we will kind of ramp up the live streams and be on our normal Tuesday and Friday schedule. So I'm sorry about that. Between NAMM and my vacation and our corporate kickoff meeting, it's eating into live streams. All right, so we see from Patrick Emmanuel A asks, how to automate rates in Arpeggiator on ARP on sequences section inside box. There's some names. What's that for? We have two Arpeggiators. How do they differ? So let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so there are two different arpeggiators. One is a more basic arpeggiator that came in earlier versions of Cubase, and that's so let me just select. So again, if I come here and let's get to our MIDI inserts that we could choose. So we have Apache 5, so this is, you know, where you can choose, okay, what's the, you know, what is the size? So the step size. Or if I wanted these notes to last longer. Or to be more staccato. So we could adjust. And if I wanted this to go up and down, or down then up, or ascending, descending, or random. And if we wanted to kind of set particular key ranges so we could just kind of come over here. Now, the other Apache SX is kind of later, so this will have kind of a classic mode, but we could also have a sequence mode where we could take any MIDI part and drag and drop that to make the sequence that we wanted to. So if we wanted to automate different parameters, we could do that. So let's say I wanted to automate my step size. I could assign this to a quick control slot. So let's say if I just wanted to come here, and let's say I have my quick controls. So what I can do now is just click in here, and we're going to say, let's go to on our MIDI track. So I think if we go to so I'm just going to click on Learn, and I'm going to move the step size parameter. Okay, so now as I would play a chord in, so we again click on Learn. So and let me just get this so we can see it. So as soon as we come back to our all right, let me just I'll just do it on this one. So we'll come to our quick controls. I'll go to MIDI inserts, Apache. So now we'll come over to quick controls, click on Learn, move the step size. Then we'll take Learn off. So now as I adjust my quick control, we could use a fader on our controller to adjust our various parameters. So that's how you could automate the different parameters there. All right, so we see value saying hey to everyone who's hoping you will be able to join up later. All right, we see Sable Winters says she was sick, but she's feeling better today, so we hope you have a complete and full recovery very quickly. All right, we see Jeff Zabelski from Chico, California. All right, so we see Greg, can I see my meter and control room inserts at the same window without having to change all the time? Okay, so let's say... So one of the things that you could do if you have like the control room going on with the inserts, so let's just come do this project here real quick. So there's two different ways to approach this. All right, so say I want to see my control room. So one of the things you can do if you want to see, so if you go into the meter, you can see control room. if you click on the CR, and then you can see your metering here, as well as, so if you want to see that in the inserts, all right, so if you want to see the meter, so one thing that you could do also, so let's say I take this project window, and I just wanted to make kind of the project window here smaller, and you could open up a separate control room as a standalone window. So if you wanted to come over here and say, okay, I want this control room always to show meters. So this way you don't have to switch back and forth. So you could have this just as your meter, and then you can still see your inputs. But you know, the meter, we could come over here and see our metering and the control room together once this is enabled. But if you wanted to see the inserts, you could just click here and see the inserts and have kind of a separate floating control room windows. I know a lot of mix engineers will have the control room, like the loudness meter is always on so that they don't have to switch back and forth. All right, so Cross-Eyed says, importing from Cubase's 3 suggestions. So really, once you have Cubase's 3, there's a Cubase's file project importer. So all you'd have to do is go to import, and we would say, let's import Cubase's project. All right, another question, how interconnected is Cubase 12 and the new Yamaha DM3 mixer? So yeah, that was announced on April 6th, and we kind of debuted it in public at the NAMM show. So the DM3 is kind of a compact 8-channel mixer, so you could record directly via USB or via Dante into Cubase. And there is a remote control layer, so it basically works as a Mackie control. So it's a wonderful solution for a small format. So you have 16 ins and I believe 6 outputs. So at that point, you could treat it as your audio interface via USB or via Dante. And if you wanted to mix and match other Dante devices, you could record directly into Dante Virtual Sound Card. And at that point, you could use it as a control surface as well. So it works very well. Kind of typically Yamaha over-engineered. Mike Rivera says, hello, Greg. Are you ever in San Antonio, Texas? Let me buy you dinner when you visit, just to say thank you. So I used to go periodically for the Texas Music Educators Association show, like in February, but I haven't been, you know, with after COVID pandemic, you know, they've really kind of cut our travel schedules. But I'll let you know the next time I'm going to be in San Antonio. It'd be wonderful to get dinner. Thank you for the invitation. Always like going to San Antonio, being on a Riverwalk. All right, so Mark Raven says, watch out. He's been composing. He's got a list of questions. He's going to just email me. All right, so yeah, please send them along. Okay, so we have a question, and then my chat field jumped on me. Let's see if lots of questions in my future. All right. So you see from Patrick ask, Greg, how to lock signature tracks with the MIDI track? If I move MIDI signature tracks, should move along. Can I set like that? So I think, you know, it makes sense that they're independent, but let's see if we could lock them together. You know, because moving a MIDI track shouldn't move the signature track, but let's take a look. Add a quick instrument track here. All right, so let's say if I just come here. All right, so let me just. All right, my MIDI controller is acting up. Let me just draw some notes in. Just add a chord tracker and populate some chords. All right, so let me just come over here. All right, so if we wanted to, let's say we'll put a 2/4 measure. Let's do a 3/4. Okay, so if you wanted to move these together, let's see if they will move. So I think the signature track is, set to where it is, but if we want it to, let's say, if come here, that you could. So you may need an initial value to move, but let's say if I come here and I want, so it's going to need an initial value that probably can't be moved. But let's see if we could just move these events together. So it looks like they're going to be independent of the MIDI tracks, which can make sense, I think. But let's see if we duplicate. So we could maybe not move with the mouse, but if we wanted to now come over here and duplicate the events, that they will be duplicated like that. But, I think that they're kind of separate entities. But, you'll need to have a value for the first one. But if you wanted to copy signature tracks, just hold down the Alt key, and then you could just come over here and copy the events as well. But they're going to be kind of two separate entities, and realize that signature track could also have, ramifications for other things as well when you move it together. All right, so we have a question from Angelina Gargano. Hello, should I install all previous maintenance updates in Pro 12? The last time I did it was 12.02, or just update to the most current one? Thanks. So I would just update to the most current one. 12.06, you don't really get any benefits of going to 12.0, I think there's, to 12.03, 12.04, 12.05, 12.06, just go straight to 12.6. All right, so we see, does Cubase have some inverted gate thing built in? I ended up making a send and inverting phase. Not a nice solution. So let's say if we have, so I'm just trying to think, it's from the appeared one. So I think it's going to have just kind of a standard gate, but one of the things that you could do, let's say if we have, there is a MIDI gate that you might be able to use. So let's say we'll come over here and I'll put this on like a master fader. So let's say as we come, take a look at this. And so I'm not sure what particular workflow you want, but maybe this will help us go to dynamics and you'll see MIDI gate. And now I could take a track, let's make a MIDI track. And what we want to do is to send this out to our MIDI gate. So now let's say as we're playing, and you don't hear a note until it's actually in MIDI. So the gate is closed until you actually play MIDI in. Or if you want it to be based on note on message, we could just come over here and switch the hold mode. So see if maybe, I'm not sure if you wanted something to open based on something else, but if I wanted to even take like the outputs from my kick, let's say I want to take my kick and use that as the basis for the noise gate, I could go to my hit points and we'll say create MIDI notes, and I want to put it on the first selected track. And now I could open up the gate based on the kick drum. So anytime that there's so you only hear things open up when the gate, but if you could maybe let me know if there's a particular type of, function that you're looking for. So, all right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce on the live stream. He says, hope that NAMM was great. So yeah, it's a good show. We also got to do some of wonderful studio and producer visits after NAMM. That was a lot of fun as well. All right, Jeff Sabelski asks, Greg, when recording a large audio track, whether stereo or mono, is there a way to double-click to make sure there were no millisecond breaks of loss of sound after a track is recorded? So generally, you will get if there was a record error, you would get a little pop-up message indicating, and sometimes it may, like if you have a slow disc, it could indicate that maybe the tracks are, like too many tracks are in record. But there isn't a particular function that allows you that will show you that there's no millisecond breaks. But generally, if there wasn't an issue, you would get a little like record error message if there was any dropouts. All right, so we see from Daywood Small, I have an EQ plugin that I cannot control from my MIDI controller. Does Cubase 12 support third-party plugins control? Yeah, it certainly does. So I don't have many third-party plugins on my system, but it's really, most parameters, let's see if I have something. I should just download a freeware plugin just to have one. But we'll come over here to inserts. So I don't think I have any. So let's say this is a third-party one. It comes with Cubase, but really all you have to do, to control particular parameters, is, often could be like a right click. So let's say if I wanted to right click, I think I may have a third-party VST instrument. Might not be running under Silicon mode. But yeah, so there's no discrepancy. Some third party, generally all you'd have to do for any plugin is you could just right click on a parameter, and if you're in Cubase 12, let's say I have a remote control here. So let's say I have under my MIDI remote. I'll have like the choice os controller. Let's see if my so say I go to my MIDI remote here, and any of my controllers. So say I'll just go to my nano control here real quick. So if I have plugin parameters, whether it's third party or whatever plugins I want, I could right click and say pick up for MIDI remote mapping, and then we'll say, okay, I want this to be in my Korg Nano control, move the parameter and apply mapping. So now I could just control just like that. So, it could be that some plugins don't, a lot of plugins will have where you could right click and learn functions. But just about any particular function, you could just right click and say pick up for MIDI remote mapping. But there could be plugins that just don't support it. And it's kind of out of our control a lot of times when that happens. So, but you could definitely control third-party plugins very easily. All right, so a question from Brian Sawyer. Had a MIDI part that I rendered. Went back this week to fix a part in the MIDI and could not. How to unrender the part or edit the MIDI. Have done this in other DAWs in the past. All right, so let's come over and we'll just say, all right. So if a track is frozen versus rendered, it could offer different behavior. But let's say, so if it is frozen, so when I come here and we choose to freeze the particular track, so just come right over here, and if we freeze it, this is going to render it in essence, and now I can't edit the MIDI until it's unfrozen. So we could disable the, we could delete the freeze files, and now we could edit. If it is rendered, like through render in place, so if I come here and we'll go to our render settings, complete signal path, we'll come over here. So now we could edit the MIDI, but it's probably by default muted. So if you come over here, you could unmute it and still edit and hear it. But if it's frozen, just unfreeze the track, and then you should be able to freely edit as you would expect. So try that, Brian. All right, so we have Stefan checking in from Sweden. Thanks for joining us. Just seeing, make sure I didn't miss one question here. I just see, I think from Daywood Small, just making sure I didn't miss. All right, so don't really see, or Daywood Smatty. So maybe if you want to ask the question again if I missed it by any chance. All right, wonderful to see Nick on. All right, so we see, can you arpeggiate the chord track? Okay, so let's come over here and I'll just enter some chords in chord track. All right, so right, so I'm just going to have the chord track, and then I'm going to have it play back through my Rhodes patch here. So we'll have this play back through monitored tracks. All right, and just could choose the Rhodes track to place back. So let me just solo just a Rhodes track here. All right, let's do a new project here. Sorry about that. Let me just. All right, so we'll quickly add an instrument track here. Okay, so now we want to take our chord track. So I'm going to go to the MIDI insert. So now that that is playing back through the chords, let's put that into a cycle. So now the chord track can just kind of play back, generating the chords. So just on the MIDI track that's playing back, you could just insert an arpeggiator and just kind of play back the chords like that. So the chord track, while it doesn't necessarily arpeggiate, the tracks can have an arpeggiator on that the chord track is feeding to generate the sounds. All right, wonderful to see Lucy Godfrey on from London. Glad you could join us today. All right, so Nick says that like button will not whack itself. So yeah, if you have learned a new tip or trick, make sure you hit the like button. All right, and we have Tony sending greetings from Kenya. Thanks for joining us. So we see, hi Greg, is it possible to dissolve a MIDI part without showing the pitch and in the tracks and events name? All right, so let's say I want to come here and let's, so I will come and we'll dissolve by pitch here. So let me just join these together. Okay, so say if we uncheck optimize display. So I don't know of a way to not have it kind of carry the name over. So it's going to, you know, from the event itself, it's going to, you know, take the particular, you know, event name and the pitches. You could set up, if it bothered you, you could set up logical editor presets, like a project logical editor preset. But that's kind of the default behavior. So we could say I want to transform, and we'll say media type is, or we'll say container type is equal to track, and then we'll say, let's go to our insert, and we want to name, and let's say we want to erase after C, like the name of the event. So you could just simply do something like that. So you could erase after, or generate erase front character, erase end character. So you could replace, or you could say anytime that there erase, you know, specific text if you wanted to. But by default, it's going to carry the pitch over if you dissolve pitches, which I think is helpful, especially for drum parts. All right, so John McMillan asks, maybe a dumb question, but is it possible to reduce the size of a plugin in Workspace? I bring up Groove Station, it pretty much obliterates the screen, as does the Loop Browser and Media Bay. So some of the plugins, you know, like we always kind of recommend, like I think a 1920 by 1080 resolution. So, you know, it could be, you know, like I find that this is like a really good resolution to be at. So if you're running like at a different resolution, so say if I open up Groove Agent here, so you know a lot of the plugins aren't necessarily resizable, but at some point you have to, you know, if we go to my system preferences, and let's say if we go to screen resolution, so displays, you know, so if you have it something like this for your resolution, you know, that's not a good resolution to be running Cubase at, so change your resolution. I know that some MacBook Pro, you know, MacBook Airs are really limited in their resolution, so and that's just a limitation of the onboard video, but you know, always try running like a 1920 by 1080 resolution. You could run, you know, much, you know, and you could see that that fits very comfortably and gives you a lot more kind of screen real estate to work with as well. So try adjusting your screen resolution up if possible. See Tim Weinheimer says, Greg, nice to see your pictures from NAMM and your vacation. Yeah, so we had a good time. So And we have Ram Kot on. Says, cheers to Greg for the amazing work. All right, and we have Riz from Pakistan. Thanks for joining us today. And we see Braxel on. All right, we see Sable Winters, wishing she's going to be quietly resting and wishes everyone a great weekend. We hope you feel all better soon. All right, Greg, could you tell us how we can find the tempo of a song in Cubase 12 Pro? All right, so there's a number of ways of doing this. So if it's like a recording where you don't necessarily know what the tempo is of the original files, there's a couple ways of doing it. One is a tap tempo. So let's say if we're playing back a project here, I could come over to my project and we see beat calculator. So I could just come over here and I could just kind of get a rough, just tapping along on my space bar. So maybe 132, 134 roughly. Now, if you want it to be, if it's something where you need it to be very accurate, what you could do is select the event, get a project, and let's get to tempo detection and say analyze. And now, as we listen to it, and now we could just figure out the tempo directly from the event itself. So you could do a tempo detection. So all right, so John Koskian wants people pressing the like button, so it helps keep the lights on. All right, so Braxel asked, Greg, is it best to use the control room over using the output section for stereo outs? So I generally will always recommend, if you have the control room, to use that. It gives you some additional functionality. So let's say, if we have a project here and, we want it, a lot of times when people are working with multiple, working on a mix and they have powered speakers, one of the traps is that as we're playing a particular project, that people will use their master fader as their volume control. So if you export it, if you're using this as your volume control and your speakers are too loud, you could have a lower output exported audio mix down. So this will affect the gain structure of your mix. Whereas if we use a control room, we could just have a monitoring level that doesn't affect the gain structure of the mix. This will also allow you to monitor between different speakers if you wanted to, or if you wanted to choose different down mix presets. So if I wanted to monitor this in mono, check for mono compatibility. And we could also do stuff like, use the listen bus. So a lot of times when we solo a particular track, I can say, okay, I want to come over here to the guitar. We could solo a particular guitar, but we could also have what we call listen bus. And that way that track could come out and kind of dim the other tracks by a specified amount of dB. And on the control room, we could also have different processing going on as well. So if we actually wanted to do like room correction, like when we saw the immersive plugin, the Embody plugin, we could have plugins that just affect the actual monitoring path as opposed to plugins that will affect not only the monitoring path, but will affect the actual mix. So a lot of times people have room correction plugins and they're like, oh, okay, I don't really see a particular, it'll be processed during their mix down and not just in the monitoring path. So there's a lot of advantages of using the control room as opposed to just the normal stereo outs. See, John Costigan says on this topic, says once you get used to the control room, you'll wonder how you worked without it. So that's a great comment. All right, so you see question from Michael Pierce. Hi, Greg. Working on a live set at the moment. Different projects for each track. Same channels. Want to import channel settings from previous track. All inserts, etc., get copied correctly. Sends are ignored. Is this working as expected? So if you're importing the channel settings, so make sure that when you are importing channel settings that, so you probably exported, the selected tracks. So if you exported the selected tracks and imported the track archive, when you export the selected tracks, make sure that you have the sends selected as well. So I'll do it on a simpler project here. So if I had all these tracks going to a, let's say I have these going to an effects channel, so we'll have them go to reverence. All right, so if I wanted to export these as a track archive, so let's say these are now all going to reverence. So I will export these selected tracks. So we'll export the selected tracks here. Oh, I did events, wrong one, sorry. All right, I'll just use reference only. We'll call it Pierce. Save it to our desktop. All right, so now I want to import. We'll do new project. And we'll import our track archive. And we'll have Pierce. We'll select all the tracks, including the effects channel track. And now we have the reverence, and we go to our send levels here. The sends are included. So let me know if you're, Michael, if you're exporting it as a track archive with the effects channels included in the track archive. And I think that should do the trick for you. All right, Braxel asks, how do I set up templates so that when I start a new session, everything is ready to go? So once you have everything configured, really all you need to do is to choose Save as Template. And at this point, we can say, let's go to a new project. And we go to New Project, you'll see under More. And then you could just, at this point, choose your template, and then as you double click, then everything will be configured for instruments, effects sends, groups, routing. So once again, just simply choose to go to your file menu once you have everything kind of set up as you want and save as template. And then when you start a new project, under the More section, you'll just have the capability of seeing all the user-generated templates right there. All right, so we have Spencer from Atlanta checking in. Thanks for joining us. All right, so Mark Rabin asks, seems I forgot how to do or things changed chord track to MIDI track. I used to drag, but not working. All right, so let's say if we have chord track. All right, so I'm just going to drag my chords to a MIDI track. So let's go ahead and just add a quick instrument track. So I'm going to select the chords here and just drag it straight down. Another method that you could do, I think, is if you go to project, and let's say we go to chord track, we can say chords to MIDI on a selected MIDI track, and then it will also be created. But you should be able to drag, or again, go to project, to chord track, and choose chords to MIDI, and that will place it on the selected track. So give that a try, Mark. See Steve Leeds just saying, wow, Lurson Meyerson rooms are very cool. It is pretty cool. So. All right, so we see a question. Hi, do you have any plans to add copy paste between Cubase and Dorco? I think it already works, but let's give it a shot. Just all right, so say I want to select all the MIDI notes here, copy. I think you could even drag and drop between them, but we'll. All right, let's see if paste works here. All right, let me try just drag and drop. I think you could do this as well. So you could just drag and drop between the two programs. So you could take any of the parts and just drag it right into Dorco. So you could give just drag and drop if you do it, I think, just on the play. It may have also been just do a new project here in Dorco. I think there's also some changes with so we'll hit OK. And then you could just have your oboe part right over. So you could just drag and drop between Cubase and Dorco. So you give that a shot. All right, this is good. Next question. Thank you for all the great questions. Again, if you learned something new, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. All right, we got a question from VTS 404. Question: Hi Greg, there is latency when recording? I'm using a lower buffer size, like 64. I could overcome only that by using constrained delay compensation button. Is there any other way around? So basically, the latency is probably caused by plugins in your system. So the constrained delay compensation that we see in the bottom left-hand corner, that will bypass plugins that are causing latency. So you could be running at a lower buffer size, and there's a lot of people that may have like a mastering type plugin on the master bus at all times. So, try to take those. You could have your, like, while you're tracking, not have those plugins turned on or have those plugins disabled. But it's just, it's probably, if it's being solved with this, it's just the plugins that you have in your system that are causing that particular latency. So maybe while you're tracking, you don't have those plugins enabled, and that will take care of it for you. And a fast way of doing that, if you don't want to go through and find, if you have tons and tons of plugins that are compounding the latency, is just to use the constrained delay compensation. So unfortunately, it gets to be just physics kind of thing. All right, see, nice comment from Mark Rabin. Says thanks Greg for our live streams and Jazz Dude and Agent K. These are incredibly valuable learning tools. I'm grateful and thank you. So thank you so much for the comment. It's always great to know that you're helping people. We see Nick just mentioned to Mark Rabin a drag from the chord track works for him as well. All right, so Paris Morant asks, says, hi, Greg, thanks for great work. Is there a change events content color, like changing a note to a different color from the event, like in Logic? So if you have like a series of MIDI notes, we could choose note colors several different ways. One is we could choose, we'll see like the little color tool. So we can color based on different criteria. So if we want it to, let me just make sure I have it activated here. Where's my little color setting? Okay, so we see this little palette here. So we could choose to colorize by velocity. We could colorize by pitch, by the channel, by the part. So, we could also colorize by scales. So if it's in the scale or in the chords or in the voice, if you have chord track, sound slots, if you're utilizing VST expression maps. So you could colorize, based on particular things. But let's see, we might be able to set colors. So let's say if I wanted A sharp 3 to be a particular color, we might be able to do this in the Project Logical Editor. Let's give it a shot. Project active window. So we'll say media type equals MIDI. And let's see. I don't think we could do, we may not be able to do particular colors or for particular MIDI notes. Yeah, so can't set, doesn't look like we can set particular notes, but once again, you can just come over here and choose, what color palette that you want to utilize. So again, once you come over here, we could, every pitch could be its own color, every channel, etc. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. So Robert Higgins says, "Did not know you were on today. I love this feed." Yeah. So once again, we should be back to normal, scheduled every Tuesday and Friday starting in May. But I have meetings next week, so sorry it's been a bit sporadic this month with vacation and my vacation and the NAMM show and a corporate kickoff, which I have to attend next week. All right, so we see, how do I change the color of the menu bar, i.e. the very top bar containing the pull-down menu labels and the words Cubase Pro. So this might be kind of fixed by the operating system, so I don't think that... So we go to the menus here. Let's see if there's anything at the OS level. We dock in menu bar, like on Mac, there may be, I'm not sure if you're running on Mac or PC. Let's take a look, say menu bar. So it may be one of those things that might be fixed at the operating system level. So let's see if I open up Dorco, if it's the same colors. So looks like, so I don't see it as being dark, and I see just second comment, black text against dark gray could be pretty hard to read. If there's any ambient lighting, so it looks like this might be an OS level thing. So let me know if, I don't know if you're running on Mac or PC, but if you could specify that, that might be helpful. So Daniel's side and ask, will there be an anniversary giveaway today? So I'm not sure what the anniversary is. We had a 3-year anniversary, and we did several giveaways then. The 3 years anniversary of the live stream, so that was on March 17th. Yesterday was my 31st anniversary with Steinberg, but there's no giveaways today. We did some just last month. Yeah, so you see Jazz Dude says, next week, no hangout. Next one, Tuesday, May 2nd, same time. Needs to be confirmed. Yeah, so that's the next one will be on May 2nd. It's my wedding anniversary. All right, my chat field just jumped. Try my best to catch up. All right, so we have Dwight Saib wishing me a happy Friday. So thanks for joining us today. Happy Friday to you as well. All right, so we see Daniela Tocan on. Thanks for joining. Hope you're well. So Danielle asked, my question is, can spectral layers be used as standalone? I'd like to check out Isotope ARX 10 Advanced. So yeah, you can run Isotope, or you can run spectral layers either as standalone or as a ARA extension. So if you wanted to run spectral layers, all you have to do, just get your applications. And then we'll just come right over here to Spectral Layers 9, and you could run it as a standalone program. And there you are. So all right, great to see Uno Momento on. See some discussion at King Crimson that Robert Higgins listened to, and Greg Lake left the band. All right, so Little Wing Audio, thanks for joining us. All right, so you see a question, how to correctly bounce the stems for the film, for example, strings and woods have the same reverb or need to send them to different reverbs. Any other tips for that? Thanks. So it used to be, if you have Cubase 12 and Cubase 11 and earlier when they came out with the, so let's say everything here is going through one reverb or Reverence FX. So it used to be in previous versions of Cubase. So a lot, depending on what you need to deliver for stems, and every one could be different. But if we wanted to go to your file to export audio mixdown, prior to version 11, if you exported, if you had like all of your winds in a group, all of your brass in a group, all your strings in a group, and they were using the same reverb, that you would hear the reverb return of other tracks. So if you're exporting your woodwinds, you could hear the reverb. If you're using the same reverb and you exported the group, it would take the reverb that was also being used on brass and strings, and you would hear that. But with version 12, when you export the reverb, when you export the group, it will not include the reverb returns on any of the other groups. So that was a big change that happened in version 12. So if you have, it used to be people would have, each group would have its own separate reverb built within the template, and that's no longer necessary because reverbs from other tracks and other groups won't be included in the stems for the reverb that you are exporting. So probably just simply export all of your groups and you'll be in good shape. All right, reading through comments here. All right, so we see Jay from Secret Studios asks, regarding the arpeggiated chord tracks, is it possible to extract the arpeggiations of the chords as they're actually played into the MIDI instrument track? So it'll fire it off in real time, but if you wanted to extract them, let me see if I still have that project open. Let me see if this is it. I think we could. All right, so we'll come over here and see if this is. Okay, so let's say if we have our Arpeggiator on, and I will just switch this to eighth notes. All right, so what we would need to do with this is I'll say, let's come over to our project menu, and we could probably do this in a macro and say chord track, chords to MIDI, and then we could choose freeze MIDI modifiers, and then that's going to be in the track. So as we list it, and it's still playing through the chord track there. So that's all you'd have to do. So let's see if we could create a macro to do that. So we'll come over to key commands. We'll say new. And we'll say chord arpeggios to MIDI. So we'll choose chords to MIDI. We'll add that, and now we're going to choose freeze MIDI modifiers. Okay, so let's come over here. I'll have that track selected, and we'll go to macros, and we'll say chords to MIDI, and see if this works. Chord arpeggios to MIDI, and yep. So you could just run that particular macro, and then that will automatically create the arpeggio for you. So that macro to do it is just go to key commands and create a new macro. So say chord arpeggios to MIDI. So we say chords, chords to MIDI, and then MIDI freeze MIDI modifiers. Then you could just have a macro, reselect the track, and then all the arpeggios will be written as data on the project window directly there. All right, so we have Thermonuclear War saying hello from Eastern Europe. Thanks for being on today. All right. So we see from Jay from Secret Studios, what is the standard operating procedure for panning vocalists performing a duet? I commonly see mono with centered pan, but I can't seem to see anything specifically for duets with dual center. Vox seems dual center Vox seems odd to me. So generally, people when doing duets will have, you know, primarily in the center position, because they always want the vocalist in the center position for kind of the phantom image where the person sounds. You know, I've seen scenarios where there might be a subtle volume, you know, a subtle pan. So let's say if we add to volume tracks, you know, a lot of times people think, okay, we should pan really like hard left, hard right. But I've seen some vocal mixes where it's, you know, primarily like pan just a little bit off center, but you always kind of want the impression. So let's say we'll do like right 30, and we'll take this one and do you know, left 30. So where there's still kind of pan to have like a sense of space. So let's come over here and we'll just say left 30. just a subtle panning. I've seen that used, but a lot of times, people always expect the singer to be in the middle, like in front of them. So if you're listening to two speakers, people always want the singers like dead in front, even if there's two singers. Background vocals generally could be hard panned, but maybe a subtle pan between the two vocalists. All right, so Michael Pierce has to dash for a bit and will hopefully be back for the end, but he wants everyone to slap the like button. All right. All right, so we have Spike Williams checking in from Rhonda, Wales. Thanks for being online today with us. See, Heartbreak Time Machine says Cubase Discord is great. So I think Jan does the Cubase index, and I think Jazz Dude does a lot with the Cubase Discord. So, but Jan may contribute to the Discord as well. All right, we have a question from Daniela. Big question: if you score a film ready to edit, is there something like a beat calculator for film scores? So a lot of times what you could do is, let's say we have a new project, is you could do kind of time warping. So let's import a quick video file. So I'll come over here. And let's say as we watch the video, so hit F8, and we can see the video. So let's say as we're watching it, we want like an even number of bars between two different scenes. All right, so that's the Steinberg office in Hamburg. Okay, so let's say right here at the end of this scene, we wanted that to be an even 4 bars of music. So we could come over and then we could just do a warp grid. And what we could do now is just drag measure 5 to here. Now, if we go to our activate used video files edit mode, as we make changes, I can say, okay, now I want measure 9 to go to right there. And I need measure 14 to end up right here. And this is just calculating the tempos between these different events. So if you know where you are in the film, you can obviously just, one of the things you could do is come over here, just add an instrument track. And if you wanted to, record MIDI data in to the project, you could just... So say I just recorded MIDI data that we could now take MIDI data that's been recorded in. If you wanted to do just kind of a tap tempo, we could just say, okay, at this point we go to MIDI and we'll go to functions, and you can say merge tempo from tapping. And you could choose, like, I tap quarter notes or on the, one of each measure, so on the downbeat, and you could do it like that. But most film composers will tend to gravitate to, I have this scene, I need to fit this, I need that to be 4 measures exactly. I need this to be an even number of measures. And as we move the video, we could just see the particular frames here and adjust the tempo like that. All right. So you see, Greg, hi, do you know when Cubase 13 will be released? So I have a rough idea, but I'm under, if I knew the answer, I'd be under a non-disclosure agreement and couldn't reveal it. So sorry about that. I can't be any more specific. All right, so we see a question from Joe K. Does Cubase have a quick punch mode like Pro Tools where it records during pre-roll? So you could always record audio and you could set kind of the buffer amount. So let's say if we're here and I wanted to record audio on this particular track. So let's say I'm punching in, let's say I was recording directly at measure 225. So let's say I'm here, and so when you go to your preferences, so when you go to preferences, what you can do is just set the, I think it's audio record audio. You can set the audio pre-record in seconds. So let's say, okay, I want this to be 2 seconds. So let's say I have that set to 2 seconds pre-record. So, and let's say I'm going to have this set to punch in at, so I hit the I button and it's going to punch in record at the left locator. So let's see, my computer's going to cooperate here. Hang on. All right, so say I'm here. All right, so I'll just say I start recording here. All right, so since I have that pre-roll done, what you could do is as soon as that pre-roll, I'll just take it out of loop mode. Sorry about that. All right, so we'll show this again. All right, so as we record it, what we could do now that we have that pre-roll enabled, I could just roll back the left locator. So we have kind of the start locator position. And with the start locator position, all we have to do is just kind of roll that back to the left, and then we could have up to 2 seconds. Our pre-roll can be recorded right there. So all you have to do is just roll back the recording, and any information that you missed, you could go up to a minute before if you wanted to. So just activate that preference, and then I think by default it's on where you can do 1 second, but you can go up to a minute if needed. Hang on just a second. My son has a question for me. All right, sorry for the interruption. Okay. Okay. All right, so we see a question from Soren. I have an issue with Stream Deck Plus. Greg, is there a key command for center panner on the selected track? So one of the things you could do, is if you hold down the control or command key, you could click on the particular value, and that will return it to the default state. So it could be, but let's see if I'm not sure if there's a reset pan function that could be accessed, but generally just clicking on a pan while holding down control or command will allow you to just come over and have that reset to a default value. So if your fader, if you click here, it will go to 0 dB. But let's see if there's, let me just look in the automation panel, perhaps. Hang on just a second. Let me just look. but I don't think that there's a way to reset via a key command. But try just clicking directly in, with the control or command key, and that should reset it to the default value. So maybe if you click and have control or command via the Stream Deck. All right, so a question from Johnny Lizard. Hi, Greg. How can I quickly save a new project with all of its items and files inside a same named folder? So if you're starting your project, and when you start the project, you go to the and you create a new folder. So let's say we do a new project. It's going to prompt you for a folder location. So by default, and let's say, okay, I want to create a new project. We'll create empty. We choose a new folder that all of my files that are going to be used for this particular project are going to go into that folder by default. So as we open up the new folder, we'll come over, and now as we record, everything's going to be recorded directly into that particular folder. Now, if you drag loops in, one preference that is helpful for this is when you go to editing to audio, there is a function to, like as audio is imported, that you could choose to copy all files to the project folder. And if that's done anytime it's copied in, all those files are going to be moved to the project folder. If you have files that are kind of scattered around, if you go to the media bay, you could then, not to media bay, but rather to the audio pool. Sorry. At this point, you could right click and choose prepare archive, and that will take all the files that are perhaps in different folder locations and move them to the project folder for you. And one other method, if you wanted to save it to a new location, is just to come over here and choose the backup project. It'll ask you to define a new folder. And then once you define the new folder, all of the projects will be copied into the newly defined folder. All right, so we see a question. Hi, could you please tell me if there's an easy way to control all 6 sends with faders on active channel? I saw your video where you showed how to do it on multiple channels. Thanks. Okay, so let's say I want to take my MIDI fader box here. So let's say I wanted to, and let's say I have in my MIDI remote, let me just cough. In my MIDI remote, I'm just going to create a new page. So I will come over and I'll say, let's create a new page. So let's say I want to take channels 1 through 8. So let's say sends 1 through 8 on select it. All right, so what I want to do is let's just add quickly an audio channel. And let's say I want to add effects channels, so I'll add a reverence to it. I'm going to add, let's say, a delay. And we'll just add a couple more here. so say coursing. All right, and let's add one more. Let's say a flanger. Okay, so now let's say I have one track and I have, let's say, 4 effect sends on it. So what I could do if I wanted to assign on this particular selected channel, I'm going to come over, so we double click on a fader. So say I move this, and let's go to our browser. So once we open up the browser, we're going to go to selected tracks, and we'll choose send slots. So I'm going to say send slot 1 level. Let's come over here, send slot 2 level. Send slot 3. I move the fader on the third fader. Double click. Let's say send slot 4. Double click. Send slot 5. And we'll just continue here quickly. So we'll say, okay, let's get to 6. Move the fader. All right, so now I'm going to duplicate this track a couple of times. All right, so now so as I move my faders up and down here, I go to, let's say, my mix console view, and we go to send. So that's on channel 1. I go to this channel. I control sends 1 through 8, etc. So let's come over here to channel 3, do channel 4. So just moving my controls, so moving 4 faders at once, we could just come over and be able to control our different send effects just like that. So go into MIDI remote and just come over to selected channel, and then you'll see send slots, and then you could just have it be levels for 1 through 8. So that way you select one channel, and then you could have your 8 effect sends with 8 faders pretty easily. All right, so we see question. Does Dorco works perfectly if you just open MIDI from Cubase, because the score editor in Cubase needs so many manipulations before it looks correctly? Thanks. Every program, it could really depend on the performance. So if you played something and you're, behind the beat, ahead of the beat, both of them will have tools for being able to interpret that. So they are kind of different algorithms or tools, but sometimes when you're working in notation programs and you're entering in the notes specifically, you're not recording it in real time like a sequencer, that those tend to work better, because you're specifically inputting different different values. But a real-time performance, you may have to do manipulation on both ends, and both Dorco and Cubase will have different algorithms for kind of managing that as well, kind of like an appearance quantization. Okay, so we see a question from Miguel. Imagine you have a project of recorded drums live played on tempo with a click, and you want to chop all the tracks and move them. with the same relation phases to the grid. It says I did that in Cubase 9.5. Okay, so if you wanted to, if you have like all of your drums, one of the cool things that you could do now in 12 is the audio warp functionality. So let's say if I have a number of drum tracks here, one of the cool things we could do is just say, okay, I want to take all these events, and we could just enable, if we have these in a folder, we could enable phase coherent audio warp. So like as we wanted to come to particular events here, we could just say, okay, we go to our warping tool and we choose free warp. All right, so let's say at this point I just wanted to put in like some warp markers. At our different hit points, let's say, okay, we'll come here. So if you wanted to just come over here, we could now, because all of these are selected, we could just say, okay, we're going to move all of these tracks. So, if we're zooming in, we can say, okay, I want this snare hit and all of its tracks to be warped. Like this was a little early, a little bit late. So we could do multi-track warping with phase coherency right there on the groups. So let me know if that's what you wanted to see, Miguel. Okay. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely back. So it says, welcome back, Greg. Are you still on the road? Stream caught me by surprise. So I got back Wednesday night from California. So I spent a couple days doing studio and producer visits after the NAMM show. So, but the next one we will be off next week because I have more meetings in California to attend. But we will be kind of back on our normal Tuesday and Friday schedule, Gerald, and for everyone else, starting May 2nd. All right, so you see from Spike Williams, I'm trying to extract vocals from an old stereo master using Spectral Layers Pro, but the results are far from perfect. Do you have any advice about optimizing the original for cleaner vocal extraction? So let's go take a quick look. I'll just come over here. So I think that there are a couple little adjustments that you can make, and these algorithms are always being worked on and improved upon. So let's say if we have something, just as a frame of reference there, so I'm going to go to Spectral Layers. All right, so we'll come over here to layer and we'll just say unmixed stems. So you could adjust the sensitivity here on it. And then, so if you wanted to, adjust sensitivity, that is kind of the one adjustment that you can make. So try playing around with different sensitivity values. Let's say if I wanted to come here and I'll just extract the vocals from this song. Let's take just a minute or two. We'll let it do its magic here. So, there's 100 different values for sensitivity that you could use. So you could try, working and adjusting that particular parameter. So
there's time to do all that needs to be done. Not at an age when the old is too old. Time wasn't in, all I was happy.
So try playing with the sensitivity and see if you get different results. But I think you could tweak it perhaps using the sensitivity. So give that a try, Spike. You see Jazz Dude did it with Kate Bush's Running Up That Hill. Such a great song. Amazing album. All right. So we see question from Mandala Man. Hello, Greg. Happy Friday. Thank you for being here. I have a MIDI piano part that needs to sound more realistic. Is there an efficient way to do this without having to adjust individual notes' velocity? So it could really depend upon, the velocity could be very important for dealing, with particular instruments because different instruments, can, like, you may have, like, I know, like, our piano instrument, the grand, can have, I think, multitude, I think 30 some, up to like 30 some velocity layers per sample. So, to get it to sound, so, and if you do a lot of like solo MIDI piano editing, you get a sense of exactly, okay, what velocity value you need if you do it like really, all the time. So velocity could be the most critical component. But it could, the velocity really could, if you have a piano instrument that only has one velocity sample, it may not be as critical for that versus one that utilizes multiple samples for on each note, each sampled note. So it could really depend on the particular instrument that you're using, but generally the best tool for doing that is tweaking the velocities, doing variations on the velocity. But if you have a piano part that you want to send to me, you could send it to Club Cubase at steinberg.de, and I'd be happy to kind of use it in our next live stream if you want. All right. All right, so Drazi Eternal asks, when is Cubase 13 going to hit the shelves? So, when it's all done and ready. So we generally don't announce before it's released. I think it's just kind of an annoying thing to do for a company, just kind of a bad tease. So, All right. Wonderful to see Benny joining us from a gig. So have a great gig, and we'll see you next time. All right. Johnny A wants everyone to smash the like button. All right. David M says hi to everyone. Loads of new stuff to learn tonight. Some great questions. All right, so we see a question. Does setting up the pre-roll, and I think this might be with the record, to 1 minute eat up huge amounts of resources? I don't think it'll eat up your CPU, but it could eat up your RAM. So, but give it a try. I haven't tried it on multiple tracks for a long time in a real-world situation, but... Okay. Okay, so Drives Eternal says prepare archive. Yes, now I can make a fire drum sound pack. All right, Garkorama says great to hear your reassuring voice once more, Sir Greg. So glad to be back. I missed being able to do the live streams. It's more fun to do the live streams than the NAMM show. Wonderful to see Gareth on. All right, so we see from Secret Studios, couldn't find CC number triggers in remote settings. So I'm not sure, like, if you're trying to find in the MIDI remote tab, you don't necessarily have to, it'll capture. So as soon as you are, once you've done the setup for the MIDI remote, so just come over to, let's say we'll do a new MIDI remote here. All right, so just delete this one quickly and we'll start fresh. All right. All right, so, once we're kind of building, let's say, okay, I want to do faders here. So, so when you say the MIDI CC, so, once you actually just kind of move the parameter, the MIDI CC is just automatically captured so that we can have everything laid out. So you don't have to physically enter in a MIDI CC, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding the question. So, but it'll just automatically capture MIDI CC when you're building the particular device. All right, so we see from Spike Williams, can you show us how to reverse the polarity of a keyboard sustain pedal in Cubase? All right, so I think we just come over. So we just go to different project here. So a lot of times, MIDI controllers can automatically sense. So sometimes you may have to unplug it, turn your keyboard controller on with it, and then connect the MIDI controller. But you could come over to the input Let's say if we go to the input transformer, and we'll set it to track, and let's open panel. And there may be just a preset for this already. And you'll see sustain pedal polarity switch. So say type is equal to controller 64 and value to mirror, but there's a preset in so that as you're playing in, you could just flip the polarity. Then you could also do this same exact functionality inside of the logical editor as well. So if you already have existing data. All right, we have Jeff Payne checking in from Beaumont, Texas. Thanks for joining. All right, so we see Gareth is indicating Michael Teams is on vacation, so we missed a virtual ice cream. All right, Lucy Godfrey says Cubase Live must be the coolest show in town. Thanks for the kind words. Club Cubase Live, she amended. We're just glad that we have such wonderful people on the live stream. We got to meet a lot of people who are on the live streams while I was at the NAMM show, so it's great. All right, so you see from Secret Studios, it says, he just says, looking on the forums, it seems as though people were saying that the QC and the MIDI remote device setup will not allow us to trigger CC, but are reliant on the buttons knobs to adjust levels. So generally, once you have, the MIDI remote here, and it says, okay, so, as we come over here, so we have MIDI CCs that are now controlling, like different parameters. So these are controlling 8 parameters, and let's say I assign these to to focus quick controls. So if we want to go to the mapping assistant, I'm going to come over here. We'll switch it to my Choice OS controller, and we'll say, okay, focus quick controls. All right, so once we have these assigned to our focus quick controls, these are now controlling the quick control. So these are transmitting MIDI CCs, and these MIDI CCs are telling it to do MIDI quick controls. So what a lot of people do, like I have the Nectar controller, I have 8 faders that are used as quick controls. I have 8 knobs which are used to transmit MIDI CC. So we could think of the MIDI CC as like a language, a communication language or protocol between them. So I could take the MIDI CC message and convert it to quick controls, or I could take the MIDI CC message and just record it as MIDI CCs. So if I wanted to just record this as MIDI CCs, that's when I would, not use this in the MIDI remote control because it's just natively transmitting those MIDI CCs. So I don't need to run it through the MIDI remote layer to do that. So I hope that makes sense. All right, so we see that Gareth is filling in as a humble servant of the Michael Team's Crafted Ice Cream Service. So that's good. We're all missing ice cream as it's probably getting a little warmer. All right, so with that, I know we had questions that were mailed in, so let me get to those. Thanks for all the great questions and comments. Let's go take a quick look at questions that were mailed in. All right. So we had a question. Is there a way to have global configurations? So a lot of times when, we could have, if you wanted to have different scenarios that are set up, all the functionality will be available to use inside of Cubase. But, if you wanted to have something set up, if you wanted it to be customized, what a lot of people will utilize is like a template so that you could have kind of everything laid out and organized and configured from the start. Nuendo does offer functionality where you could turn on and off different functions of the program. I don't think that is really useful. A lot of people don't want to turn off parts of the program that they paid for. But there isn't so your template can have a lot of the different settings stored, and you could have different preferences stored and, different functions within your template that are visible and not visible. But I'm not sure if it's like a global configuration. All right, we had this question on the last live stream, I think on April 10th, from Sven Isaacson, and he was asking about how to raise all the clips volume proportionally in an audio montage in Wavelab. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so let's just come over here. So let's say we have an audio montage, and I'm going to just quickly select our different clips on our montage. So the question was how to raise the clip gain on all of them at once. So it's just going to be, I kind of feel dumb for missing this, but just a modifier key. So if you hold down the Alt or Option key, we can raise and lower all of the clip gains on the different tracks at once in an audio montage. So once they're all selected, hold down the Alt or Option key, and then we could just adjust all of the clip gains just like so. All right, so exit out of Wavelab. Sorry for forgetting that last time. All right, so we had a question on how to turn off automatic quantization on input. So all you have to do is you see this AQ button on the transport. So we see it just kind of right over here. So as soon as we see AQ, that's auto quantized. Once it's kind of orange, that means it's activated as it is illuminated. So you could just come over here and then turn on and off automatic quantize. So this way, if I wanted to play in a particular sound, like let's say, okay, I just wanted to, auto quantize different elements, we could quantize on input. So if I just was playing 8th notes or 16th notes, we could just come over and play just like a bunch of notes very quickly. So let's see if we could show it here. All right, I'll just turn the control room up here. So let's say now I wanted to just, on this particular track, put in straight 16th notes. So I'm going to set my quantize value here, let's say to 8th notes. And I'm going to put on my metronome. So, and as I hit record here, I'm just going to put in. So now when I play it back, it's just going to be perfect 8th notes. So if I wanted this to be like straight quarter notes, I could put my quantized value to quarter notes. Once auto quantize is active, come over and we'll hit record. So now when I go back, everything will just kind of play back directly as quarter notes. So if you wanted to turn that off, all you have to do is, again, come over and just turn off the AQ right here. And then as you turn off the AQ, the automatic quantize will be disabled. So my computer's not liking something today. Let's see if we get my computer to wake up here. All right. Let me just see if I can maybe reboot real quick. Sorry about that. All right, so next question. All right, so it says I have Cubase LE12 and Groove Agent SE. When I click an instrument pad with the instrument window of a preset in Groove Agent, there's a delay of a few milliseconds that is noticeable and forces me to quantize and makes me lose the exact positioning of my instrument, like hi-hat, for example. Is there a way to get Groove Agent to play and record the instrument without delay? The same happens with my controller. So all you have to do, it sounds like kind of a classic case of, if we have different controllers, let's say when we come and let's just say we'll come over to this instrument, and as we want to listen to, let me just make sure my so probably what you need to do is just come over here to your studio setup, and it sounds like it's just the latency. So try going to the control panel, and at this point lower the latency, and that will minimize the delay between the notes that you play and the notes that you actually hear, the responsiveness of the particular notes with that. So let me just check my. Okay, so let's go to the next question. All right. Hi, Greg. I've got one question. Well, two, actually. One of them is, how do you find the time to do music with all these marathon 4-hour live streams you kindly record for us? So I don't get a lot of time to do my own projects, but and I'm kind of behind on some bass lines for Gareth and Michael Teams. So it's ironically I don't, because Cubase is my job. I'm in it a lot, so I don't, and I'm not a composer or a songwriter. I could do like arranging and producing really well and editing. But I don't get to do many of my own projects, unfortunately. So, I try to spend extra time with my family. All right. So you just see question is, no, second question. All I want is a macro that lets me bypass room correction filter plugin inserted on the master channel with one click while keeping the other inserts active. So I can quickly switch between speakers and headphones. Please help. All right, so if you wanted to bypass a particular plugin, so let's set it up in a generic remote. So if you have any MIDI controller, so it's not necessarily through a macro, but we could do this through a generic remote. So let's say on this, I'm going to have like the Embody. So it's going under spatial, and I wanted the Immerse. So we'll activate that. So at this point, we want to, let's say I wanted to bypass this on my master section. So this is going to be slot 3. So what I want to do is let's go to our MIDI remote. And I'm going to say I want this particular button here. So I'm just going to double click. So I want this button to bypass on my master channel, the output. So I think if we come over, so let's go to our insert and strip. So let's go to our inserts viewer. We may have to do this in might have to do it in the MIDI remote or the generic remote. So let's set up a generic remote to do this. I'm just gonna, so let's go to Studio Setup. I'll just check one more thing here. Okay, so let's go to our generic remote. So we'll go to Studio Setup. So it's not going to be like from keyboard shortcut, but if we go to generic remote, and we say we want it to come from our MIDI controller. All right, so I'm just going to hit, I'm going to click on the Learn button here, and I'm just going to hit like a drum pad on my controller. So we see that this is MIDI note 36. So I want to say, let's go to my stereo output. Let's go to insert 3, and then we'll say bypass. So now I hit apply. So as soon as we come over here, I'm going to hit this particular button. Let's see if it's the right one. So again, let's just look at the generic remote under Studio Setup. All right, so let's come over here, see if we can do, just bypass the inserts here. Yeah, so if we just wanted to, again, so come to, and let me just see if I get it for the one. So it's good here. We'll say insert 3, and we'll say bypass. Apply. I may have to hold it down, but you could just come over here and you should be able to, let me try with a different plugin. So say I did it with an EQ plugin like frequency. All right, so say I want to bypass my frequency plugin. So let's see if we could do that. So we'll go to our generic remote again. So I think that would do it, but let me just turn it on and off and see. See if we turn it on. Okay. So you could just come over here and go to studio setup, and you want to add a generic remote. And then you could have any of the MIDI messages. You want to choose that particular channel. So this is the incoming MIDI message. Choose a channel. And then you could go to the particular insert slot and turn it on and off directly there. So it's not a macro per se, but just going to be like any MIDI controller can do it. All right, so we have just a question. I've made a MIDI remote channel for a channel strip plugin for my Korg Nano Control Studio. Depending on the color of the track, the buttons and faders are colored too. However, when the track is a light color, yellow for instance, then the descriptive text of a MIDI remote button is no longer readable because the writing is in white letters. All right, so let's say if I wanted to come over here, and let's make this kind of a bright yellow. And let's do a MIDI remote for the selected, and I'll just make this for selected track. All right. So over here, we can see that, some of, and the person was kind enough to send pictures, but like when I go to, let's say if I wanted to turn this function on for something, so I'll double click here, and the person had sent kind of the whole file over, so I'm not sure if this is, I know there's some changes with this in 1205 with the labeling, but I'm not sure if you're running the same. But let's say if I go to the selected track and I wanted this to be EQ band on off, that when I apply the mapping here, that the text, when you hover over, you can see the text, but when it's enabled, that you may not see the text when it's enabled, when it's kind of white on white. But it seems like for like the text descriptions, but I know that there were some changes from 1205 on with that, but I'll make sure to kind of pass it along as well. All right, so let me get back to our live questions. Thanks for all the questions that were sent in. All right. Okay. Okay, John Costigan says reverse polarity on sustain pedal equals revelation of the day. Thanks. All right. All right, so we have a question. Can you show the Dolby Atmos feature on Cubase? Okay, so let's go ahead and just kind of start a project. So the first thing you need to have in your project is for everything, and I'll just kind of start this from scratch. You want to make sure that your buffer size and your audio interface is set to 48K. So we'll come over here. We'll just say, let's go to our audio interface, and we want to go to control panel and make sure that we're at 512 samples, and that your project, like this project here, is in 44.1. So let me just, and we need this to be in 48K, so I'm going to change the sample rates here. So let's go ahead and I'll just go to my project setup. So I'll just switch this over quickly. All right, so now we're at the right sample rate and at the right buffer size. And what we need to do now is we go to our project menu and we go to ADM authoring for Dolby Atmos. So once we had this done, there's a setup assistant, and we can say, okay, we want to add the main mix channel to the render. We could add beds. So just kind of check everything. And this, it's a kind of a convoluted setup, but if you just kind of go through the setup assistant, this will work. And we want to choose that we're now monitoring in binaural. So now that we're doing this, so now what I want to do is to take the different tracks, and as we go to their panner, is we could now pan these particular tracks and say we want to put it into maybe object mode. So if we take, so we can say, okay, I want this piano to be in back, and we could adjust the height. So let's say we'll open up another track. So let's say I want this piano to be kind of upper left. When we go to this track, I want its piano to be more upper right. So we'll just, so now as we would take a single source, we can just have the particular tracks be able to do all the panning. And I kind of have this kind of set up in a different project here. So let's say I want it to go, and we're kind of monitoring, let's say, in headphones. So let's come to, let me just go to one that's kind of set up. So we say, okay, this is kind of roughly panned for Atmos. So as soon as we listen to it now, so again, we can monitor binaurally with headphones. And as we do this, so as we would kind of pan, so let's say we'll just take this one bass, move to the back of the room, and adjust the height. So, and now if we wanted to come over here and listen to this through go into our control room and let's add the immersive and say, okay, now we wanted this to be in Alan Meyerson's room. And all the room corrections. So we can say, okay, we want this to be set up for, 712. So we could just kind of come over here and set up not to be in stereo. Now we can configure everything to be going through that. And once we're done with the room calibration, once we're done with all of the mixing, all you have to do is come over here to the ADM authoring suite and export the ADM file. And then that's what you could give to the label, to the production company as your final product. Okay, so you see from Uno Momento, what is Atmos? So Atmos allows you to kind of mix in surround with heights, so you get kind of a 360-degree spherical sound field. All right, so we have a question, maybe already asked, how to get the control room tab on the right panel. So if you have, the control rooms only in Cubase Pro and Nuendo, so really all you have to do is when you may see like your media bay, but if you have Cubase Pro, so if you have Cubase Artist or Elements, you may not see the control room, but you can now just click on the control room here, and that will become visible. If you don't see the right panel at all, go to the upper right-hand corner and then click right here in this icon, and that will open up the right-hand side, and then you could select between 4 different tabs right there. All right. All right. All right, so we have Rude Screen checking in from South UK. All right, we see Graham Witcher's joined us from Royal Wooten Bassett. See, and Gareth says, see, Nick has played with the automating the panning, and it's awesome. And see, Gareth saying Atmos plus Studio Simulator, and now his brain is melting. All right, so Uno Momento says our concert hall is for sale. Where do we need a room for recording acoustic instruments? All right. Okay, so I'm not sure if that's more rhetorical, but all right, let's see if there's any other questions. I think I'm at the end of the questions. We'll see if there's any more questions that come up. All right, so we see Jazz Dude's just asking, any news from NAMM we need to know? So the only thing that, most of our announcements aren't really coincided with trade shows like in years past. But, we did have a lot of like really successful, we had a great show. We're showing some live streaming Yamaha hardware in conjunction with the Steinberg interfaces. There was the Immerse plugin, so that was just started to sell right after NAMM. So if you want to get the Immerse Virtual Studio, with those additions, so that was kind of the new Steinberg product that you could purchase. That was announced during the NAMM show time. We also had some wonderful studio and artist visits. We got to go with Star Parodi. We went to MX Studios, Max Martin Studio in Hollywood. We had a lovely dinner with Ian Kirkpatrick. We met with producer engineer Lido, as well as Mark Wary, who works with Hans Zimmer, and a beautiful dinner with composer Paul Haslinger, who's also known for being involved with Tangerine Dream. So a lot of great appointments and visits, but NAMM attendance was down. It's kind of to be expected. It's like not the normal time, and so hopefully next year everything will be more normal and kind of have bigger attendance. So. All right, Garrett's just saying, hope that I had a lot of fun at NAMM. So unfortunately, lots of other people have fun at NAMM, and I get to work the whole show. So, so we see Jazz Dude just has a question of MIDI 2.0. So there's a lot of aspects of MIDI 2.0 kind of already inside of Cubase. There's probably more stuff that's being released, but we're waiting for hardware companies to implement MIDI 2.0 stuff. So it gets to be kind of a chicken and egg scenario. See, Gareth is happy to hear about Ian. So yeah, we had a great dinner with him, just talking about different production tips and his impressions. So, all right, we see that Gareth has met Tangerine Dream once. Okay. All right, we'll see if there's more questions that come in. If not, we can wrap up a little bit early. And sorry for the month of April being kind of not the normal live stream schedule, but we'll be back on for May and probably for the rest of the year, except for maybe a couple of holidays coming up, but we should be back on our normal schedule. All right, we'll give it another 30 seconds or so, see if there's any more questions that come in. If not, we'll wrap up. You see Jazz Dude just says, but Yamaha is the chicken in the chicken and egg scenario. All right. So you see a question from Super Audio Guy. Is there a startup process with new licensing? Every time I cold start Cubase, I have to fight missing licenses, activation manager, restart PC, etc., particularly Halley and Sonic 7. I do on Absolute 5. So, make sure that when you go to, the Steinberg licensing, there's the Steinberg Activation Manager. So I think if we just come here, we could open up the Steinberg Activation Manager. And make sure that this is signed in for your account. So when you come over here, make sure that it's actually signed up for your My Steinberg account. And once that's in the background, I think that should mitigate a lot of your problems with that. So check that. All right. All right, so we see Kevin Ochoa just says, who can I get in contact with Steinberg if I'm building a VST for Hallian? So I can put you in touch with I think there's a Hallian developer area on the webpage that you could look at. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could put you directly in touch with the team. So we have lots of people that are doing all sorts of wonderful instruments for Hallian. So yeah, please email me again, Kevin, at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, we see Jay from Secret Studios. Will you attend a Waterford, Connecticut Audio Alchemist Roadshow? So I think that's just being done by Marek Stikos. So I think it's primarily like brands that he reps or that he represents. So I don't think it's a typical audio roadshow that many third-party companies are going to. So I don't think we're not planning on being there. Okay. All right, so we see from Cross-Eyed, first time on stream, coming back. That's great. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope to see you in the future. Again, we usually do it on Tuesdays and Fridays. We go for about 4 hours. We're glad you can make it today. All right, so we see Mr. Bob, did you try out the AG08 yet? It's really cool. You just need to know some tricks. So I'm implementing it into my system. So I had some interference with my other audio interface where it's probably just laying over an Ethernet cable. So I hope to get it all set up and using it for the next live stream. I just had to have some time to rewire some things, I think. But I think it's I was showing it a lot at the Winter NAMM show. So I think it's really slick. Okay. All right. So we see Greg. Have you heard anything from the release Cubase 13? Does it release in the next month? So just know that the team is always working on future stuff, and we generally don't announce releases ahead of their actual release. All right, so we see from Secret Studios, could you ask Steinberg to add GPU audio dev for VST3 in Hallion? Yeah, so it seems like, we're still waiting for a lot of the GPU audio stuff. There's a lot of people kind of making comments on it at the NAMM show that it, still isn't available. So we just have to kind of wait and see as it develops. But yeah, it kind of seems like it should have been done now. So, but it seems like, the processors are also really fast as well. See, Gareth is looking forward to the first Hyperdelic Atmos release from Nick. Okay. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions. Sneak in. You see Gareth just saying, great to see all the thumbnails again. So. Gareth said the next Club Cubase will be bigger than the new Musk rocket. Yeah, these are probably in small pieces now. So, all right, we'll wait another 30 seconds or so. If not, we'll go ahead and wrap up. See, Garrett's just saying, sorry, Greg. No. My dad worked in all the Apollo mission stuff and all the rockets, and he used to always tell me that when one team would delay the launch, that all the other teams would have a big sigh of relief so they could go fix last minute stuff. So. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. So we'll see everyone May 2nd, and I look forward to having kind of a full normal month of live streams. And everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you next week. Thank you very much, and goodbye.